My mother called my college graduation a failure ceremony. Then she posted champagne photos with my sister, while my seat beside the stage stayed empty. I said nothing. I took my diploma, and I disappeared from their lives. 4 years later, she called me crying. The same woman who couldn't spare 3 hours for my graduation suddenly needed $350,000. What she didn't know was this: I wasn't coming back as the daughter they discarded. I was coming back with proof that could destroy our family name in open court. And before my mother lost everything, it all started the day she decided I was the child easiest to throw away. It started with 2 suitcases by the front door. I was 8, too young to understand strategy, old enough to recognize when adults were avoiding my eyes. My mother kept smoothing my coat sleeve. My father kept checking his watch. No one was angry. That would have made more sense. They were calm. That's what stayed with me. People think cruelty always looks loud. Sometimes it looks organized. Sometimes it sounds polite. They said I'd be staying with my grandmother for a while. They said it would help everyone. They said it like I should feel lucky. I remember nodding because kids do that. We nod when the people in charge lie confidently. Part of me wanted to ask one more question. Why was I the only one packing? But I already knew not to make things harder. My sister Lauren stood in the hallway holding a stuffed rabbit. She wasn't crying. She looked confused, then distracted, then gone. That house in Chicago always cared about appearances. The right curtains, the right schools, the right smiles when guests arrived. I was starting to notice something else. Some children are loved openly, others are managed quietly. The drive to Vermont felt longer than it was. My father talked about traffic. My mother talked about schedules. No one talked about me. When we reached my grandmother's house, she opened the door before we knocked. She looked at the suitcases first, then at my face. And something in her expression changed. She didn't ask them to come inside. That told me more than any explanation could. My mother kissed my forehead like she was late for something. My father said he'd call soon. He didn't. I stood on the porch listening to their car disappear. I told myself it was temporary. Children can survive almost anything if they believe it's temporary. My grandmother took 1 suitcase in each hand and said, "Come inside, Claire." No speech, no pity, just warmth. That was the first honest thing I'd felt all day, and once I lived with real love for a while, the old house stopped making sense. The next morning, she made pancakes like nothing had happened. Butter sizzling, radio humming low, sunlight on a chipped kitchen table. No speeches, no questions. She just set a plate in front of me and said, "Eat while it's hot." I didn't realize it then, but safety is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up in ordinary things. She packed my lunches with little notes inside. "Good luck today. Proud of you. Bring home your sweater." Tiny sentences, huge repairs. She came to every school event, winter concerts, spelling bees, parent nights, even the boring ones. And she clapped like I was the only kid there. At first, I didn't trust it. That's what neglect does. When kindness arrives late, it can feel suspicious. You keep waiting for the bill. So I cleaned more than asked. Said thank you too often. Tried to be easy to keep. She noticed. One night, while drying dishes, she said, "You don't have to earn your place here." I nodded like I understood. I didn't. Children who are sidelined learn strange math. Be useful, stay quiet, take less space. Maybe then you get to stay. My family in Chicago called on birthdays sometimes. Short calls. Careful voices. They asked if I was behaving. My grandmother asked if I was happy. That difference shaped everything. She taught me how to sew buttons, balance a checkbook, and spot people who only love audiences. She never poisoned me against them. She didn't need to. Real love makes imitation obvious, And once I felt what care was supposed to feel like, I started noticing how much had always been missing. By 15, I was waking up before sunrise for shifts at a diner. Coffee stains on my apron, homework in my backpack, grease in the air before first light. I'd serve men who called me sweetheart, then rush to class pretending I wasn't tired. That became my rhythm. School, work, study, repeat. My grandmother hated seeing me worn out. She'd leave $20 near the toaster sometimes, acting like she forgot it there. I usually put it back. Part of me wanted the help. Part of me was terrified of needing anyone. That fear can make you proud in unhealthy ways. So I chased scholarships like rent was due, applications at midnight, essays on weekends, interviews in borrowed shoes. I learned something early. When nobody plans to rescue you, planning becomes a survival skill. Meanwhile, Chicago stayed polished and distant. Holiday cards arrived with signatures that looked rushed. My mother praised Lauren's dance recitals, internships, social photos. No one asked what I was building. At first, that hurt. Then it became useful. Neglect gives you a strange freedom. People who overlook you rarely see you leaving. I chose data science because numbers don't flatter people. I chose healthcare systems because broken systems always tell on themselves. Maybe I was already trying to solve my own life. By 19, I had a full academic package and one suitcase again. Funny how life repeats symbols. Only this time, no one was sending me away. I was choosing where to go. My grandmother hugged me so hard I almost stayed. But love that's real doesn't trap you. It prepares you. So I got on that bus with fear in my stomach and steel in my chest. And years later, I'd walk across another stage expecting something I should have stopped expecting long before. The morning of graduation, I kept checking my phone. Cap on the chair, gown hanging by the window. 3 unread messages from classmates. None from family. I told myself they were traveling, running late. Parking was bad. Hope is stubborn like that. Even when evidence is standing in front of you. I had mailed invitations months earlier, followed up twice, sent the schedule, the address, even nearby hotels. I made it easy. That's something wounded people do. We overprepare for love we shouldn't have to beg for. My grandmother arrived first, of course. Blue coat, sensible shoes, flowers wrapped in grocery paper. She said, "You look expensive." I laughed harder than the joke deserved. She always knew when I needed breathing room. We found our seats. Families were everywhere. Parents fixing collars, taking photos. Fathers pretending not to cry. I kept turning toward the aisle. Every time doors opened, my chest moved first. No Parker faces. When the ceremony started, I finally called my mother. Straight to voicemail. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. I stepped into the hallway to listen. Her voice was calm, almost bored. She said she didn't believe in celebrating mediocrity disguised as ambition. Then she called my graduation a failure ceremony. I remember staring at the cinder block wall while students passed me laughing. It's strange what the body notices during pain. The cold floor, a vending machine humming, my own hand shaking once, then stopping. Part of me wanted to leave right there, skip the walk, throw the cap away. But humiliation makes 2 offers: collapse or become harder to move. So I went back inside. My grandmother looked at my face once and knew. She didn't ask what happened. She just reached over and squeezed my wrist. That saved me more than speeches would have. Names were called row by row. When mine came, I stood, walked, smiled for the camera, and crossed the stage like nothing had broken. Sometimes dignity is just movement. I took the diploma with steady hands. That mattered to me. Afterward, people flooded the lawn taking family pictures. I stood beside my grandmother under a maple tree while she straightened my collar 3 times. Then my phone buzzed again. A social media notification. My mother had posted photos from a garden luncheon in Chicago. Crystal glasses. linen napkins, summer roses, Lauren smiling beside her. Caption: beautiful afternoon with the people who matter most. That line hit harder than the voicemail. Cruel people often want witnesses. I screenshotted everything. I didn't know why then. Maybe some part of me already understood memory gets questioned, but proof does not. My grandmother handed me the flowers and asked where I wanted lunch. No pity, no drama, just forward motion. So we ate at a roadside diner. I laid my diploma beside the ketchup bottle, and somewhere between fries and silence, something old inside me went cold. I stopped wanting them to finally see me, and once that need dies, you become dangerous. The next Monday, I was back at my desk by 8, inbox full, rent due soon, coffee burnt and overpriced. Nothing outside me had changed. That was the strange part. The world keeps moving even when something in you ends. I answered emails, took meetings, finished reports. I smiled when expected. I said, "Sounds good," more than I meant, but I stopped checking my phone for them. No birthday hope, no holiday fantasy, no quiet wish that this year might be different. I had spent years trying to win a game they never intended to play fairly, so I withdrew my application. That's what healing looked like at first. Not peace, not forgiveness, just redirection. I worked later, studied harder, took contracts other people avoided. Every insult they gave me became fuel with better manners. Part of me hated needing pain to motivate me. Part of me knew pain was already there, whether I used it or not. So I used it. I became obsessed with systems, how things break, how patterns hide inside clean numbers. Maybe I was learning business. Maybe I was learning family. Either way, I got sharper. And while they kept performing perfection in Chicago, I was quietly building something they would never see coming. The first offer came on a Tuesday afternoon. I almost ignored the email. By then, people with money had started using warmer language. Exciting opportunity. Strategic partnership. Quick conversation. Success attracts manners that failure never sees. What I built started small. A tool to flag billing patterns hospitals kept missing. Waste, fraud, numbers pretending to be normal. I understood pretending. So the platform worked. One client became 5. 5 became contracts I once would have framed on a wall. Then firms that ignored me wanted lunch. I took the meetings, asked better questions, charged what scared me. That part matters. Sometimes growth is just tolerating the price of your own value. When the acquisition offer came, I read it twice, then handed it to my attorney because disbelief is not due diligence. We negotiated for weeks. I slept badly, ate standing up, checked clauses at midnight like my future could leak through fine print. Part of me feared it would collapse. People raised on instability expect doors to close loudly. Instead, the wire hit my account on a Thursday morning. Too many zeros. Too much silence. I just stared at the screen and laughed once. Not because I felt rich. Because the girl they dismissed had become undeniable. 3 days later, trade media picked up the sale. And 48 hours after that, my mother called. My mother's call came while I was folding funeral clothes. That's the part people miss. She didn't reach out after years of silence because she changed. She called 2 days after my grandmother died. Timing tells the truth faster than words. I let it ring once, then answered. Her voice was soft, practiced soft. She asked how I was holding up, called me sweetheart like she was borrowing someone else's script. I said very little. Grief makes you quiet, but not always weak. After the funeral, I stayed alone in the house. I couldn't stand the idea of strangers clearing drawers she had touched. The place still smelled like cinnamon and cedar. Her glasses sat beside the sink. A bookmark waited halfway through a novel. Loss is loud in ordinary objects. I started with the bedroom closet, winter coats, old quilts, boxes labeled in neat handwriting. Then I found the cedar chest, Inside, beneath folded blankets, was a thick envelope with my name on it. My hands shook before I opened it. Some part of me knew she had left more than memories. There was a photograph first. My mother, younger, smiling in a way I'd never seen, standing too close to a man who was not my father. Then a typed note. Short, direct, very her. Do not trust sudden kindness from people who ignored your pain. I sat down on the floor after that, because grief had already hollowed me out, and now suspicion was moving in. There was one more thing inside, a business card for a private investigator named Michael Turner. On the back, in her careful handwriting, if they come back, start here. I read that line 3 times. Part of me wanted to believe she was mistaken. Part of me knew she rarely was. Then my phone buzzed again. Family meeting tomorrow. Chicago. Important. And for the first time, I understood I might be walking into something much older than money. The next morning, I drove to Chicago in silence. Rain on the windshield. Coffee going cold. My grandmother's note in my coat pocket. Family meeting. Funny phrase. Families usually meet when something is broken. Mine only met when something was needed. The house looked cleaner than I remembered. Fresh stonework. New paint. Expensive flowers near the door. Image maintenance never takes a day off. My mother opened the door, smiling like we were close. Arms wide. Voice warm. Too warm. She kissed the air beside my cheek and said, "There's my girl." I almost looked behind me. My father shook my hand instead of hugging me. Firm grip. Corporate eyes. He treated me like a donor already halfway out the door. Lauren floated in wearing cashmere and practiced concern. She said, "We've missed you." No, they hadn't. They had missed access. We sat on the terrace where lunch was already plated. Wine glasses out, linen napkins folded. Even greed wanted a nice setting. Part of me felt 12 again, the outsider invited in only after everything was arranged. But another part of me had changed. When people rewrite history too quickly, they usually need something urgently. My mother touched my hand and said they wanted to honor Grandma's legacy. Then my father slid a leather folder across the table. And I knew the performance was over. I opened the folder and saw my grandmother's name in gold lettering, the Parker Legacy Foundation. Elegant logo, heavy paper, professional layout. The kind of packet designed to calm your instincts before you read the numbers. My father began talking immediately. Scholarships, opportunity, community impact, support for overlooked students from fractured homes. He used phrases people trust when they want to stop thinking. My mother watched my face the whole time, not with love, with measurement. Lauren leaned in and said, "This could finally bring the family together." That line almost impressed me. Some people can weaponize reunion the way others use threats. I kept turning pages. Mission statement, launch plan, donor tiers, media rollout, gala timeline, advisory board, then compensation schedules. Lauren listed as executive director, 6-figure salary before a single student helped. My mother had a consulting retainer, monthly, generous, undefined. 2 outside vendors billed premium rates for strategy and branding. No proven outcomes, no real track record, just polished language and expensive confidence. I felt something cold settle in. Greed rarely arrives wearing greed. It shows up dressed as legacy. My father kept speaking like momentum could replace scrutiny. He said the city needed this. He said Grandma would be proud. He said I was uniquely positioned to lead. Funny. When I needed support, I was inconvenient. Now I was uniquely positioned. Then I reached the final page. Founding family contribution, $350,000. There it was, the real reason I was invited back. My mother placed her hand over mine. Soft touch. Controlled smile. She said, "We know how successful you've become, Claire." Translation mattered more than tone. They knew what I was worth now. Part of me wanted to laugh. Part of me wanted to flip the table. Instead, I asked questions. Who selected the vendors? Why salaries before programming? Where was independent oversight? How many scholarships were guaranteed? 3 people. 4 answers. None aligned. That told me more than the packet did. Lauren said I was being negative. My father said I was thinking like an auditor. My mother said family should lead with trust. That one almost made me smile. Trust from people who exiled you is an expensive joke. I nodded slowly and closed the folder. I told them I'd review everything carefully. You could feel the relief at the table. They thought caution meant softness. They thought silence meant confusion. People mistake calm for compliance all the time. Lunch continued like they'd already won. Wine poured, forks clinked, future plans discussed around my money. I played my part. I thanked them for thinking of me, said I'd be in touch soon. Then I drove back to Vermont with the folder on the passenger seat and my grandmother's note in my pocket. Do not trust sudden kindness. I didn't. And before sunset, I called the man whose card she left behind. Michael Turner answered on the second ring. No greeting, just, "What are we looking at?" I liked him immediately. People who live around lies learn to value direct sentences. We met the next morning in Burlington. Gray office, clean desk, cheap coffee. No fake sophistication anywhere. I handed him the folder. He flipped pages fast, slower at the numbers, paused at the vendor list, paused again at my mother's consulting fee. Then he looked up and said, "Your instincts are late. This already smells bad." That almost made me laugh. While he handled people, I handled paper. I spread every document across my kitchen table. Budgets, draft bylaws, salary schedules, donor projections. This was my language. Numbers tell the truth eventually. You just have to stop listening to the captions. At first glance, everything looked polished. Legal registration, tax filings in progress, professional branding, timelines, talking points. But fraud rarely starts messy. It starts elegant. Line items rounded too neatly. Administrative costs hiding in vague categories. Projected donations unsupported by history. One vendor charged premium rates with no portfolio. Another used shared office space and borrowed credibility. Lauren's salary was absurd, especially for helping no one. Part of me wanted to believe it was incompetence. Incompetence is easier to forgive than intent. But the deeper I went, the cleaner the deception became. That's when my mother texted, "Hope you're excited. Grandma would be proud." I stared at the screen for a long time. Some people don't lie to hide shame. They lie to preserve status. I texted back one sentence. Still reviewing. Then Michael called that evening. He said he'd found something about an old photograph. And suddenly, this was no longer just about money. I reopened the spreadsheets before sunrise. When something feels wrong, sleep becomes inefficient. I started tracing every vendor attached to the foundation. Addresses, registrations, prior clients, ownership trails. The first firm looked impressive online. Modern website, strong language, stock photos of people pointing at laptops. No real case studies, no meaningful history, just confidence with good lighting. The second vendor billed premium branding fees. Their listed office was shared by dozens of shell entities. That told me plenty. Respectable fraud rarely wears a ski mask. It wears a logo. I built comparison sheets across my dining table. Rates against market averages. Projected costs against actual need. Nothing screamed. Everything whispered. Launch event expenses padded. Consulting retainers undefined. Governance language vague enough to drive trucks through. Lauren's compensation package bothered me most. Not because it was high. Because it assumed entitlement before effort. That was the family business model in one line item. My father called around noon, asked if I had questions, said timing mattered, said donors were excited. Interesting choice of word. Urgency is often the perfume of manipulation. I told him I was still reviewing. He got quieter after that. Then Michael sent over his first notes. Private refinancing on the Chicago house. 2 recent debt positions. Cash pressure hidden behind landscaping and fresh paint. There it was. The foundation wasn't generosity. It was flotation. Part of me felt sick. Part of me felt relieved. At least greed makes sense. Love withheld for no reason is harder to survive. That evening, my mother emailed updated projections, bigger donor numbers, faster timeline, more pressure disguised as momentum. I noticed something else. They had already drafted materials naming me founding sponsor. Without approval, without consent. They weren't asking for partnership. They were planning to use my name first and my money second. I leaned back in my chair and looked at the ceiling for a long time. Some families don't reconcile. They rebrand. Then Michael texted 6 words. Need to discuss the man. Urgent. I met Michael that night in his office. No small talk. He slid a thin file across the desk. Inside were archived photos, old gallery programs, and one name highlighted twice. Richard Bennett. The man from my grandmother's envelope. He had been a known photographer in Chicago years earlier. Talented, charming, financially unstable, the kind of man people excuse until later. And according to Michael, he and my mother had history. Not rumor-level history, pattern-level history. Witnesses remembered them together. Too often, too closely, too long. I felt my stomach drop, then steady. Sometimes the body recognizes truth before the mind agrees. Michael kept talking. Dates overlapped with my parents' early marriage. Social circles overlapped too. So did silence. Part of me wanted to dismiss it. Families survive on denial more than love. But then old memories started moving. The way my mother stiffened when I looked like my father. The way Lauren was adored without effort. The way I was managed, then removed. Certain puzzles only make sense backward. I asked Michael one question. Do you think this explains why they sent me away? He didn't answer immediately. That told me enough. He said, I think money is one reason they called. This may be the other. I drove home with the windows cracked in freezing air. The road was dark. My thoughts were louder. And by morning, I knew suspicion wasn't enough anymore. I wanted proof. I scheduled the testing 3 days later. Private lab. Chain of custody. No shortcuts, no family drama, no room for denial. If truth was coming, I wanted it clean. My sample was easy. My father's was easier than it should have been. He'd handed me a coffee mug after lunch on the terrace. People reveal trust in small, careless moments. Lauren's took more effort. I hated that part. Not because it was difficult, but because it felt like trespassing through damage I didn't create. Still, I needed certainty. By then, uncertainty had cost me enough. Richard Bennett's reference sample came through legal channels Michael located. Estate records, preserved material, verified chain. Everyone suddenly became very useful once facts were billable. Then came the waiting. I worked during the day, reviewed contracts at night, answered my mother's sweet texts with one-line replies, excited to move forward. Let's talk donors soon. Grandma would be proud. Every message sounded like perfume overwrought. Part of me hoped the tests would clear everything. Simple greed is ugly, but simple. Family secrets are heavier. The email arrived on a gray Thursday morning. I didn't open it right away. I made coffee first, fed the birds outside the kitchen window, stood there pretending delay could change outcomes. Then I sat down and clicked. My father was my biological father. Clear match. No ambiguity. I felt relief before I understood why. At least one thing in that house had been true. Then I kept reading. Lauren was not his biological daughter. I read the line twice, then 3 times. She matched Richard Bennett. The room went very still. I could hear the refrigerator hum, the clock tick. My own breathing turned shallow. Every memory began rearranging itself at once. My mother's coldness toward me, her softness toward Lauren, the way my father apologized with silence instead of words. It hadn't been random. It had been architecture. I remembered being 8 at breakfast asking why Lauren didn't look like either of them. My mother's face changed that morning. I remember it now with terrible clarity. By the next day, my suitcase appeared. Children think adults act from wisdom. Later, you learn many act from fear. I sat there for a long time with both palms flat on the table. Part of me wanted to cry for Lauren. Part of me wanted to rage for myself. Mostly, I felt something colder. Understanding. And once you understand the motive, the past stops hiding. Now I knew why they sent me away. The only question left was what they'd do when they learned I knew too. I walked to the bathroom mirror and stared at my own face. My father's eyes. My father's jaw. The features everyone mentioned when I was little. I used to think that resemblance connected me to something safe. Now it explained exile. My mother hadn't pushed me away because I was difficult. She pushed me away because I was obvious. I was the child who made the lie harder to decorate. Lauren could stay inside the portrait. I could not. That realization hurt in a cleaner way than rejection ever did. Random cruelty leaves you confused. Calculated cruelty leaves you clear. I sat on the edge of the tub remembering small things. How my mother corrected my posture in photos, then placed me at the side. How she stiffened when relatives said I looked like Dad. How quickly she praised Lauren for breathing. Back then, I personalized everything. Kids do that. We think adults are weather, and somehow we caused the storm. But I hadn't caused anything. I had simply noticed too early. That breakfast memory returned sharper than ever. I was 8, holding cereal, asking why Lauren didn't look like either of them. Silence first. Then silverware placed down too carefully. Then that tight smile from my mother. The next morning, I was packed. Part of me wanted to hate my father more. He knew I was his daughter. He knew what was happening. And still, he chose peace in the house over justice for his child. Cowardice often wears a polite face. I also thought about Lauren. She had been favored, yes. But favoritism built on deception poisons everyone eventually. No one in that family got love clean. I dried my face, though I hadn't cried. Some truths don't make you weep. They make you steadier. Because once I understood why I was removed, shame stopped fitting. I was never the unwanted child. I was the inconvenient witness. And if they were willing to bury that truth for decades, I knew exactly what else they'd do to protect themselves now. The first article appeared on a Friday morning, a small industry outlet. Nothing major. Exactly the kind of place people use when they want damage without fingerprints. The headline praised philanthropy. Buried halfway down was me. Unnamed, but obvious. A successful founder described as brilliant, volatile, and emotionally compromised over family inheritance matters. I read it twice. That's the trick with polished attacks. They sound reasonable enough to make you doubt your own anger. I wanted to dismiss it. Then my afternoon call got postponed. A client who'd been eager suddenly needed more time. By Monday, another conversation cooled. A hospital system delayed final approvals. No explanation, just distance. Reputation rarely dies in public. It bleeds privately. My mother texted that same day. Ignore gossip. Focus on healing. I almost admired the nerve. She was setting fires, then offering blankets. I stopped replying after that. Then came the emails. Not from my real address, from one close enough to confuse lazy eyes. The messages claimed I had threatened to expose family secrets unless certain financial arrangements were made. Cheap language. Wrong tone. Nothing I would ever write. But lies don't need quality. They just need circulation. Forwarded screenshots reached people I knew. Whispers reached rooms I wasn't in. One board invitation disappeared without a call. Part of me wanted to go straight to Chicago and throw the DNA report on their dining table. That would have felt good for 10 minutes. Then I remembered something. People hoping you explode are already counting on your timing. So I got colder. I saved everything. Headers, timestamps, domain details, screenshots, articles, cancellations. Pain can make you reckless. Documentation makes you expensive to attack. My father called midweek. Said the family was concerned about my behavior. Asked if stress was affecting my judgment. There are moments when contempt becomes almost clean. I told him I was fine, then asked if he was calling as my father or as treasurer of the fake charity. He hung up. By the end of that month, projected losses crossed 7 figures. Contracts slowed. Introductions vanished. People who loved momentum suddenly preferred caution. That's when I understood this wasn't emotional manipulation anymore. It was organized harm. And families like mine only escalate when they think you still need their approval. They were about to learn I didn't. The next call I made wasn't to them. It was to an attorney named Susan Carter. Susan Carter read everything in silence. The article, the fake emails, the foundation packet, my notes, Michael's findings. She didn't interrupt once. Then she stacked the papers neatly and said, "Good. They were sloppy after all." I liked her immediately. Competence has a calming effect. Panic never can. Her office was plain. No dramatic art. No ego furniture. Just order. She asked precise questions. Who had access? When did losses begin? Which clients changed behavior first? What had I preserved? I answered all of it. For the first time in weeks, I stopped feeling like a target and started feeling like evidence. Susan explained the difference between being hurt and being actionable. Pain matters privately. Proof matters publicly. So we built a file. Metadata from the fake domains, timestamps from forwarded screenshots, revenue projections tied to lost opportunities, contradictions inside their own paperwork. She had me stop taking calls unless recorded legally. Stop replying emotionally. Stop assuming family would limit themselves. That last part landed hard. Some people share blood with you. That doesn't mean they share boundaries. Part of me still wanted one honest apology. Even then, even after all of it, healing can be embarrassing that way. Susan looked at me once and said, "You're waiting for conscience from people using strategy." I never forgot that line. By the second meeting, she had traced links between the fake email domain and a consultant connected to my mother's social circle. By the third, she was drafting claims: defamation, fraud, interference, misrepresentation, real words, expensive words. My mother texted that afternoon asking if we could clear the air. We were past air. I told Susan to file whatever needed filing. She smiled for the first time and said, "Good. Now let's see how they perform under oath." The courthouse was colder than I expected. Gray stone outside, dry air inside. My mother in navy silk, dressed like reputation could still save her. My father looked smaller. Lauren looked polished and terrified. Susan carried 2 binders and no drama. That mattered. People mistake confidence for noise. Real confidence usually arrives organized. I sat behind her and folded my hands to stop watching them. Part of me wanted eye contact. Part of me knew hunger for recognition had already cost me enough, so I watched the judge instead. The hearing began with the foundation. Susan walked through the structure calmly. Executive salaries before operations, consulting fees without scope, vendor retainers tied to insiders, launch expenses with no charitable output. The judge asked simple questions. How many scholarships awarded? None. How many students served? None. Why compensation before programming? No clean answer. Truth doesn't always need brilliance. Sometimes it just needs silence after the right question. My mother's attorney tried calling it rushed administration, growing pains, miscommunication, ambition. Susan didn't blink. Then she moved to the forged emails, metadata reports, registration records, server traces, language comparisons, timestamps linking distribution to accounts inside my mother's orbit. The room changed. Even paper sounds different when lies stop working. My mother leaned toward counsel and whispered too fast. My father stopped writing notes. Lauren stared at the table like wood might open. The judge asked whether authenticity was disputed. Their attorney requested a recess. Denied. That was the first visible crack. Susan kept going. She introduced evidence of motive, pattern, and long-term concealment tied to the present fraud. Then she opened the second binder. I knew what was inside. Still, my pulse jumped. DNA reports. There are moments you rehearse privately that still hit like weather in public. Susan read them cleanly. I was Charles Parker's biological daughter. Lauren was not. Lauren matched Richard Bennett. No raised voice, no theatrics. Just facts landing where performance used to live. My father closed his eyes once. That hurt more than denial would have. My mother said the reports were irrelevant. An attack, a distraction, a violation. Susan responded before emotion could gather momentum. The defense had already presented fabricated evidence tied to family coercion claims. Motive was relevant. The judge agreed. Lauren turned slowly toward my father. You knew? She asked it quietly. Some questions don't need volume. My father didn't speak. He gave the smallest nod I have ever seen destroy someone. Lauren's face changed in stages. Confusion, rage, emptiness. I felt sorry for her for exactly 3 seconds. Then I remembered years of smiling while I disappeared. Compassion and memory can coexist. My mother stood to object again. Her voice shook this time. That was new. There comes a moment certain people meet reality for the first time because no one in the room needs them anymore. Susan wasn't finished. She showed the court how forged materials had been submitted in a context where authenticity was legally material. That changed everything. The judge referred the matter for criminal review and requested notice to the district attorney. No one gasped. Real collapse is quieter than television. My mother sat down too quickly. My father stared forward like a man reading the bill for decades of cowardice. Lauren walked out before anyone stopped her. I stayed seated. I expected triumph. What I felt was lighter than anger and heavier than joy. Completion. They could not rewrite me anymore. Not difficult daughter, not unstable founder, not bitter outsider. Just witness. As we stepped into the hallway, my father moved toward me. I took one step back. Susan closed her binder and said, "Good instinct." Then she added one sentence I still remember. They built a house out of image. Today, we checked the foundation. And outside those courthouse doors, consequences were already waiting. Outside the courtroom, no one knew where to stand. That was the first thing I noticed. For years, my family had positions. Host at the center. Golden child beside her. Father anchoring the room. Me somewhere useful or absent. Now everyone drifted. My mother came through the doors first, mascara untouched, voice ruined. She called Lauren's name twice. Lauren didn't turn around. She was halfway down the corridor, heels in one hand, walking fast like distance could become history. My father moved after her, then stopped. Moved toward my mother, then stopped again. Indecision had always been his native language. Some people don't destroy families with cruelty. They destroy them by never choosing truth. My mother finally looked at me, not angry, not sorry, confused. That interested me more than rage would have. People who control a story too long often believe they are the story. She asked how I could do this publicly. I almost laughed. Publicly. as if secrecy had ever protected anyone except her. I told her the truth became public the moment she used it privately against me. She opened her mouth, then closed it. No script available. Lauren was near the elevator when she turned back once. She looked at my father. Not me. That told its own story. He tried to speak. Nothing came out. There are apologies that die before reaching air. Part of me wanted to comfort her. Another part remembered being 8 with 2 suitcases. Compassion without boundaries is how cycles survive. So I stayed still. My father finally approached me alone. He said, "I thought keeping peace was best." I said, "Peace for who?" He had no answer. That was becoming a family tradition. The elevator doors closed on Lauren. My mother was calling attorneys. My father looked suddenly old. And for the first time, their collapse was happening without me inside it. 3 weeks later, the newspapers were quieter. That's how real fallout works. Not one dramatic headline. A slow string of updates people pretend not to read. My mother accepted a plea arrangement tied to fraud exposure, false submissions, and related financial misconduct. The woman who curated every table setting now had scheduled reporting dates. There is poetry in bureaucracy sometimes. My father resigned before he was pushed. Officially, it was for health and family priorities. Unofficially, doors had stopped opening. Men who borrow status rarely know how to walk without it. Their social circle thinned fast, dinner invitations disappeared, charity boards restructured suddenly, friends became out of town for months. I used to think betrayal required enemies. Often it just requires inconvenience. Lauren changed her last name within the season. Not dramatic. Quiet filing. New accounts. New city. I understood that more than I expected. When identity is built on a false room, sometimes you don't redecorate. You leave. Part of me wondered if I should reach out. Then I remembered healing is not adopting every person harmed by the same fire, so I let distance be honest. The Chicago house went up for sale in spring. Fresh photos, bright staging, neutral furniture. No sign of what happened there. That felt familiar too. Some families clean surfaces because they cannot clean history. People asked me if it felt good. Wrong word. It didn't feel good to watch lives narrow. It felt accurate. There's a difference. I never wanted ruin. I wanted truth with consequences. Those are not the same request. I went back to work, rebuilt the contracts that mattered, ignored the ones attracted only by gossip. And one afternoon, while clearing old mail, I found a letter from my father. Unopened. Handwritten. For a long minute, I just stared at his name. I opened the letter at my kitchen counter. 2 pages. Careful handwriting. The kind people use when they want to seem sincere to themselves. He said he had loved me quietly, that protecting the family had required impossible choices. That silence was his failure, not lack of love. Then came the real point. A trust had been established years earlier in my name. Just over $1.5 million, restricted until certain conditions or his death. Managed privately through counsel. I read that paragraph twice. Money has terrible timing in damaged families. Part of me felt vindicated. Proof I had mattered somehow. Part of me felt insulted beyond language. He had found a way to fund me. He never found a way to defend me. That difference became the whole story. People think love hidden in secret accounts is noble. Sometimes it is just cowardice with paperwork. He wrote that this was his attempt to make things right. No, making things right had been available when I was 8. At graduation, in court, in every silence between. I called the attorney, confirmed the trust, then sat with the window open a long time. I wasn't angry anymore. That surprised me. Anger burns hot. Understanding burns clean. When I finally wrote back, I kept it short. Money hidden for decades is not the same as showing up. Then I signed the documents. because closure and acceptance are not the same thing. And once the funds cleared, I knew exactly whose name they belonged to next. I started with a legal pad and my grandmother's recipe box. That felt right. The recipe cards were worn soft at the edges, measurements in pencil, small notes in the margins. Real legacy usually looks handmade. I used part of the settlement funds, part of the trust, and none of the bitterness. That last part took the most work. The Evelyn Brooks Foundation began in one rented office above a bookstore. 2 desks, bad lighting, a coffee machine that sounded injured. Perfect. We built scholarships for students pushed aside by family chaos, kids raising themselves quietly, young adults carrying adult problems too early. I knew the type. We added emergency housing grants, therapy stipends, and mentorship for first-generation students who had talent but no runway. Money helps, but being believed changes people faster. I interviewed every early applicant myself. Some had bruises you could see. Most had the invisible kind. I recognized the over-apologizing, the gratitude for basic respect, the habit of asking if they were taking too much time. Pain has accents. Part of me wanted to save everyone. That impulse can become ego-wearing kindness. So we built structure instead. Clear criteria, transparent reporting, independent oversight, the exact opposite of where I came from. People asked if naming it after my grandmother was revenge. No. Revenge repeats the center of harm. This was relocation. I was moving the meaning of my story away from them. At the first scholarship dinner, a girl from Indiana stood shaking at the podium and said no one had expected much from her. The room went quiet. I didn't clap first. I cried first. Some wounds close when they stop being private. When the event ended, I stayed behind stacking chairs with volunteers. Old habit. Then I looked at the banner with my grandmother's name across it and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Nothing missing. And once your life stops revolving around injury, a new question appears. Who do you become now? A year later, I was locking the office alone. Rain on the sidewalk. Lights off one by one. My grandmother's old keychain warm in my hand. I stood there longer than necessary. Sometimes peace takes time to recognize because chaos trained you first. People still ask if I forgave them. I never know how to answer that cleanly. Forgiveness is often sold like a duty, a final gift owed to those who hurt you. I don't believe that anymore. Some people deserve reconciliation, some deserve distance, most deserve honesty. What I know is this: their rejection did not define my value, their silence did not measure my worth. Their confusion was never my identity. I wish I had learned that younger. Part of me still grieves the girl who thought being chosen had to be earned. She worked so hard for crumbs. But grief can live beside gratitude. Because being sent away brought me to the woman who loved me right. Being underestimated taught me how to build. Being lied to taught me to trust evidence. Pain wastes enough years already. You don't have to let it keep the future too. I don't tell this story because I won. Winning is a shallow word. I tell it because truth ended the performance, and once performance ends, everyone has to meet themselves, including me. I locked the door, stepped into the rain, and started walking home. No audience, no witnesses, no one to prove anything to. That may be the closest thing to freedom I've ever known. Real love is usually quiet. Manipulation is louder, cleaner, better dressed. That's something life teaches late. Family isn't just blood, it's who shows up, who tells the truth, who stays beside you when life gets heavy. A lot of people spend years chasing approval from hands that were never open. I understand that now. Peace starts the moment you stop begging for what should have been given freely. That shift can feel small. It changes everything. Pain can shape you, teach you, sharpen you. But it does not have to own you. That part matters. Sometimes the strongest response isn't revenge. It's building a better life, protecting your dignity, creating peace where chaos used to live. and becoming the kind of person who heals what once hurt you.